we are talking to W. Earl Brown. Earl, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you.
Truly a pleasure. I have been a fan of yours for a really long time. I watch Deadwood. I have a small handful of shows that I rewatch annually, and Deadwood is one of those shows. I have seen it many, many times. Dan Doherty is one of my favorite characters in that whole show. I'm not saying that just because you're here. Al and the Marshall and Dan, like, those are my top three. I love you guys. I love that show. But you've been in so many things, and I want to talk about that as we get into our interview here in a little bit. But like, if there's a show that's been on TV, you've been in it at some point, or if you played a video game, or, wow, you've done so much, which is really exciting. And of course, you're a Star Wars fan. You've been in Star Wars. So we're going to get into all of that. But I just want to say, first off, thank you for being here. And I do have to raise a glass. In the grand tradition of Deadwood, there's anything that show does, it makes taking a slug of whiskey look like the most comforting, natural thing in the world. So it's 4:00 here, and I'm going to do one in your honor.
It's a little early here, else I'd join you. I'm sticking with coffee. But there is a bottle right over there, just in case, right underneath the Lemmy.
Absolutely.
Picture.
Absolutely.
And it's funny, I didn't know you talked to Charlie. There's an Anthrax poster just right over there by my guitar. This whole room is full of shit. It's a huge room.
That's awesome.
It's my penultimate teenage boy bedroom. So I have all my posters and my guitars and all that stuff. So
yeah, I mean, looking around there, I'm like, I want to just like explore that room. I want to just come and hang out and just look at everything. It's, yeah, I mean, if you got the Charlie poster up, I went to go see Anthrax a couple months ago. It's just, I mean, I'm just so happy they're still touring. I'm still digging all the music. And Lemmy, of course, I'm a bass player, so Lemmy is the guy.
Well, I have jammed in this room with Bello.
You have? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh God,
wow.
we sat here till like 3 a.m. playing music.
That's amazing.
Several birthdays ago, but yeah. And you say bass. I'm playing my Rex Brown Thunderbird. I just got an amp for it because I never played bass.
Ooh.
Okay.
And I mentioned I didn't have a bass, and Brother Brown, a Pantera Rex, goes, "You're going to get one now." And so he sent me the Rex Brown Thunderbird. So yeah, that's what I spent yesterday doing. Was awesome. I've had it for a few months, and I just got a bass amplifier. So I play guitar mostly.
That's awesome. Well, there's so much overlap for all of us then, because I'm also a bass player. I am in kind of my teenage bedroom / man cave, which is this one corner of my garage. But as I look to the backside of the camera, I see my daughter's drum set. I see my other daughter's electric guitar and amp. So music, nerd stuff, like it all just, works together.
You're raising them right.
Absolutely. 100%.
And Star Wars, I didn't know that you guys were music fans. And I was thinking about this before we came on, because this being a Star Wars centric, there were two events that happened, and they happened within about a 9-month period. It was right when I was 12 and 13 years old. 2 weeks, or no, I'm sorry, 3 days after I turned 12, Kiss Alive was released.
Okay.
And then the following summer, right before I started high school, Star Wars came out. And those were the two things that just really lit me on fire. My, pubescent self of feeling like anything's possible. And, here we are all these years later.
It's amazing to me how many people who are Star Wars fans are musicians or play in bar bands or whatever. Like, and I think, I don't know, maybe some of it is the fact that there was, I Kiss Alive 2 was what I got before my 8th birthday, I think it was. So, so there's something about music and Star Wars and creativity. And I know it's not just that, but I think it's the people who really take that deep dive and spend stupid amounts of money on things that they don't need that say Star Wars on it, because there's an obsession with it. And it was interesting, talking about. No, go ahead.
No, I had this conversation with Favreau and Oliphant when we first day on Mando. There's a story about that we'll get to later, but it hit me. John is 2 years younger than me, and Tim is like 5 years younger. And I was going into high school when the first Star Wars came out. And remember, you didn't even get the toys. You got the certificate at Christmas.
Right. The promise of toys.
They couldn't make them fast enough. Well, I was in high school, and I wanted them. I so wanted them, but I'm like, I'm in high school. It's just not cool. You know, nerd cooldom was not a thing back then. And, you know, a high school kid wanting toys wasn't cool. And then I would see little kids out with the, you know, the wrapping paper tubes at Christmas playing Star Wars. And I would so want it. I'd so want to do it. And that's what my wife teases me. You know, I've spent all of my adulthood getting all those things that I was denied. I was thinking of that story right before we started. I thought, you know what? I'm getting one of my lightsabers down. So
absolutely.
I like that.
So yeah,
I like that it's one of your lightsabers. That's the right way to put it.
I have Vader and the Skywalker or Obi-Wan and Vader. Although my Vader, the handle's getting tacky on it. The rubber's going bad. That's how old it is. I guess next time I go down to Star Wars land, I'll just have to.
That's right. Just have to grab another one.
Yeah. My wife works for Disney, so I get a big discount.
Awesome.
Oh man. So you talked about seeing Star Wars as a teenager or right before high school. Tell us a little bit about that experience, walking in the theater, walking out of the theater. Did it have that same sort of impact that it carries forward, or what was the feeling for you then?
Yeah. I had heard about it. I don't know when it had made my hometown, because, you know, when it first came out in May, it only played in a handful of theaters.
Yeah, right.
But this would have been, I was probably late June, maybe July, that my family, we took a vacation down to Daytona Beach. And my best friend was allowed to go with me. I could take someone with. So me and Gene were there. And my mom asked what we wanted to do. Well, we had heard so much talk about this new space movie, Star Wars. So, and a shopping mall was a big deal. We didn't have any. You know, you had to drive to Nashville to go to a mall. So just going to a mall was a big deal. So I said, well, we want to see this Star Wars movie. And so my mom, I think looking forward to a day on the beach without a bunch of hyperactive pubescent boys, took us to the mall and dropped us off. And I told my kid this when she was first getting into the movies. And I said, but you don't understand. That moment has been copied so many times by so many other movies. But that overwhelming feeling of the Imperial Star Destroyer flying overhead that just kept going and going and going and going. And just sitting there, you know, like putting my hands on and listening to Kiss Alive, feeling this excitement. So no, that's never left me. And it's still, you know, I get paid to play. I mean, that's how I make a living. So the seed was planted there, and I think that desperation, because I still have all of my Johnny West toys. That was my big thing when I was a little kid. You know, that series of were they Amiga or Marks, and those are the only toys, my actual toys from my childhood, that survived. Everything else got tossed out at some point by my mom. But I was that kid who could spend all day long with my Johnny West. You know, Sergio Leone made some Western spectacles, but none of them could compare to what unfolded in my childhood bedroom in 1970. So when Star Wars came along, you know, again, as I said earlier, I was kind of at that cusp of, you know, leaving those childhood things behind. Even though, you know, a Star Wars and a Kiss obsession, not exactly leaving them behind, but yeah. And you know, all those years later, I found myself in that universe. There were two movies that came out later that really cemented it for me. After my freshman year of high school, that next summer, Animal House and Halloween. And those were the big three for me. Those are the movies that I went back to see time and again, because, you know, this predates videotapes. So if movies made it to the television, they were edited, and so we went back to see those movies time and again, and it left an indelible impression upon me. And then, you know, I got to be in the 90s with Scream and There's Something About Mary, were kind of that generation's version of Animal House and Halloween.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And then I used to joke, all I gotta do is get in one of those Star Wars. Well, then,
there we go.
5 years ago, yeah. I started out as an actor with Favreau. We were in Chicago at the same time. I used to see him at beer commercials and truck commercial auditions. Him and Jeff Garland.
Jeff Garland,
well, Offerman came in there right at the end before I left. Andy Richter, Jim O'Hare. So yeah, yep,
absolutely.
So then I found myself on Tatooine.
That's right. Well, and it runs into, there's a neat little synergy there too. You run into Offerman early on. You're Bill in The Last of Us game. He's Bill in The Last of Us HBO. Like, it's funny how the universe kind of swings these doors and swing things back and forth. Even for us getting this chance to talk to you, I had Corey on the show, almost 2 years ago now. In mid-conversation, live on a Sunday night, he casually drops, "Oh yeah, I'm big buddies with Earl Brown. He was in, Mandalorian." And all I could hear was Earl Brown, Deadwood. And he said, he was like, "I bet I could get him to be on this show." I don't know what we talked about the rest of the night, because that was all I could think about. But then here we are. And so I want to kind of go from there. You've had an amazing career. You've been in, like I said, so many TV shows. Another favorite of mine is Justified. You're in an episode of Justified. So there's clearly an Earl Brown, Timothy Oliphant chemistry that works. And we'll get into that in a little bit with Mando. Tell us the story about getting cast to be in The Mandalorian, to be the proprietor of the bar. And I know Corey kind of told me some of this story a couple of years ago, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, as many life-changing events career-wise have happened, started with a phone call from my agent. I had been with Michael at that point. I've been with Michael now 13 years. So anyway, Michael calls and he said, what's your feeling on prosthetic gigs? I know you said you hate them. And I had guest starred on Angel. And it was, okay, everything I've read now about Josh Whedon and everything, it sort of makes sense, but that was a very unhappy set. It was not a pleasurable experience. And the makeup was sheer misery. And I was working, oh Lord, I mean, I'm not kidding. I worked 7 days straight with a weekend off in the middle, but I was there 17, 18 hours a day, putting it all on, taking it all off. And so I took Michael, "So what you feeling about prosthetics?" I said, "I hate them. No way, not doing it unless somebody's going to pay me 7 figures, and I'm not going to get paid that much." And Michael said, "Well, it's a prosthetic gig. They got a call. They're asking for you. I'll let them know. I'll let the folks over at Disney know. It's some Star Wars, but it's a TV thing." I went, whoa, hang on. Are you talking about Jon Favreau's Mandalorian? He said, "Oh yeah, Jon Favreau is producing it." I said, yes, fuck yes, I'll do it. Yeah, sure. So that's how I ended up. Well, the NDA I had to sign was like 12, 14 pages long. It was ridiculous. And you only get the scenes that you're in. They don't give you the whole script. And the show had not even premiered yet. So they're already shooting season 2 before season 1 starts. And like I had to wear a cowl. If I walked between sound stages on the lot, it had to be hidden because you had not seen the Weequay. That's news that there's going to be a Weequay character.
Right.
So anyway, that's how it is. Well, I get the scenes. It's the child. Well, of course, Tim and I have a history, and I've known Pedro for years. Pedro and I did a pilot together 10, 12 years ago that never saw the light of day. So I'm excited. And Favreau's going to be my buddies in Star Wars. And so I get there. Makeup's all done. Now, the cowl was incredibly uncomfortable because I'm not bragging, but I have been told by numerous wardrobe mistresses that I got the biggest one in Hollywood. And when you got the biggest head in Hollywood, that's saying something. So the face was molded and made, but the cowl was like a vice on my head, which feels fine for about half an hour, but by the end of a 14-hour day. But anyway, we get there, super duper secretive. I get off the van. I'm on Tatooine. Tatooine was an actual build. It wasn't on the volume.
Right. Okay.
And, there's a bantha right when I get out of the van. I'm like, oh my God, there's a working bantha. So we get inside, we get on the sound stage. Everybody's there. Being a Deadwood fan, you might recognize this piece of dialogue. So I'm behind the bar. Tim walks up and I go, "You ought to pin that fucking badge on your chest. You just hypocrite enough to wear it, you fucking cocksucker." And Tim gives me some Deadwood line back because that's our exact relationship in Deadwood. You know, me behind the bar and him, the town sheriff. So
my heart just leapt a little
laughing.
just hearing you recite that.
well, Favreau goes, "Oh my God, I did not consciously. I idolized David Milch, and I think that's his masterwork." He pointed to Tim and he went, "We cast you," and I told casting, I said, "Get Earl Brown to be Taanti." Holy shit! I've recreated Deadwood in space. And I said, "Well, can we throw some fucks and cocksuckers into the dialogue?" And he goes, "That I don't think George would sign off on that." So as we're having a big laugh, the props guy brings his cart in. It wheels behind Tim and Pedro, and I see it, and I see a little baby Yoda on the cart. And now, mind you, this is a Thursday. The show's premiering on Friday. So this baby Yoda comes by. I thought, oh, that's darling. The props guy made himself a little baby Yoda. That's so cute. And so I'm still like, John says, all right, let's go to one and let's rehearse one. Well, I'm thinking, well, where the hell's the kid? Where's the child?
What's this kid
action. Well, then Tim and I speak. We have some lines, and then Pedro enters, and there's a Grogu on a stick that a puppeteer is operating, and then it dawns on me, like, holy shit, that's the child. So I get home that night, and my wife is a VP of internal comms at Disney. At that point, she was just in the streaming division. So I get home and I'm like 13 years old. Like, we're at the dinner table here at the house. I said, "There's a baby Yoda." I mean, he's not Yoda because Yoda's his name. He's got a different name. But he's like a Yoda. He's like a baby. But he's 50 years old because they age differently. Well, my wife she kind of has this smirk on her face, and I stop and I went, "You knew?" And with perfect timing, Carrie goes, "You're not the only person in this house with an NDA, you know." So she had known about it because she was in comms she'd known about it for about 2 weeks because they'd kept it all under because they knew what was going to happen, you know. So no toys were manufactured, no nothing. All the designs were there, but nothing had been released about Grogu. And then the next day the show premieres, and by that weekend, you know, it's everywhere. It's a firmament of popular culture for the past 4 years. But yeah, I was there at that very beginning.
Wow. I love everything about that story. And I always think too, like the whole thing with Grogu and Baby Yoda, like that kickstarted the Star Wars sort of reemergence. As much as there was The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, Grogu like has become back to like when we were kids and Star Wars came out, that it became, you know, you can't swing a cat without hitting a Grogu t-shirt anywhere anymore. So it's really wild how go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
The reason why Mando to my mind is the best thing since the first 3 films is Dave and John realized that the first 3 movies had this just a sense of fun about them. I have the book, the Tation book, you know, the great big huge thing, and I think the interview was in there with Carrie Fisher, but she was talking about doing the first movie, and she says, you know, we have no money, you know, they're making everything up on the fly, and she said George was under such stress. She said Harrison and I in some of those scenes, we're just trying to make George laugh. We're just trying to lighten the load, and that sense of fun. That sense of I'm out here playing space cowboy with my buddies, that imbued those first movies. And then I thought, you know, the prequels, which I was so excited that we'd be returning to that universe, but they got so heavy-handed. They got weighed down in their own self-seriousness. And Mando was the first movie, to my taste, or the first show that recaptured that just sense of silly fun. And that's why, you know, even though I'm on it, I'm a huge fan of it, you know, look forward to each season.
Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to something that we saw after the first season came out and we got the gallery episodes where the directors and John and Dave sat down, you know, they did all those different behind the scenes episodes. And I think it was in the very first one where they really talked about, they're like, Dave and I are Star Wars fans and we grow up playing with our Star Wars toys. This was our chance to make a screen cinematic version of like, what would we do if we were playing with our figures? And that's very much the vibe of The Mandalorian. Not only is it adventure of the week, but you get, you get a flying Boba Fett, you get a baby Yoda, you get all different kinds of troopers. Like that sensibility, like it really is like a childhood reimagined on the screen. I'm sure for, you not only working on it, but being a fan, you had to have witnessed that, with the directors and with the producers on set.
Well, I was sitting right next to Dave on that wide shot where Cad Bane comes walking out of the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first shot, that establishing shot of him entering, from the horizon. Yeah. Of course, I knew Dave created that, in one of the animated shows. That was his character.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, how does it feel to be sitting here watching this unfold with a character that came up in your imagination? He got this shit-eating grin on his face, like, I can't believe, and that mm-hmm. is, I love working on sets like that. Working on Preacher with Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg was the same sort of thing, because mm-hmm. they met in bar mitzvah class when Preacher was first published. The initial flats came out, and that's how they bonded. So when they got to make Preacher into a TV show, that same mm-hmm. sense of excitement and fun of being 12 years old and the stories that, excited you and made you want to be a storyteller, to be able to become a part of that universe that you cut your teeth on is really something. And my every interaction, again, I knew John. It's not like we were bestest buddies, but I've known him for 30 years, and we would cross paths occasionally. But Filoni, I didn't know at all until, we started this show. And then I realized mm-hmm. that, he was George's right hand in all of those Clone Wars and mm-hmm. all of those. So, but to see somebody who's been doing it that long, that's still excited, it's like going to see the Foo Fighters or going to a rock concert and Dave being there. Dave I've been at shows where Dave's just been there as a fan, but that mm-hmm. that excitement, that love of what he does, of music, it just imbues what he does. So I count myself as really lucky when I get to take part in telling a story with somebody like that, because it makes it fun. Again, it's, as I said, I'm doing the same shit I did when I was 5 years old. I just get paid for it.
Right. Well, and I have to say, as we've talked about music and everything else, you said another one of my magic words, which is Foo Fighters. So, just the hits keep coming. Another thing that I wanted to talk about a minute is, I know I read while you were on Deadwood, at some point you went into the writer's room and you were able to mm-hmm. work on that show, write an episode, and you're a writer. I know that when we talked setting up this interview, you're off right now because of the WGA strike. And, I certainly want you to speak to that if you want to, mm-hmm. but also one of the questions that I'd love to throw your way is, as a writer, what's a Star Wars story that you'd love to tell? What's a Star Wars story that Earl would like to write and put out into the universe?
I have not really given thought to that. Nothing has come to me. There's not like like John had the idea for Mando, where to set it within the universe. I don't have that. I have a horror thing that I've written that we kind of got some movement on that came to me out of nowhere, that I dreamt. And I'm very, very pleased with how it turned out. It took me a while to get it all down, but yeah, in Star Wars, I haven't thought about that. I don't know. Maybe totally something will pop up, but it's. I just pretty much anything. Follow the muse. Whatever excites me in any given moment, mm-hmm. whether it's drawing or painting or playing music, I love to do it all. I just found a way to make a living at it, as an actor, and then to make some money as a writer. But yeah, on the writing front burner is a horror film. It's a slasher movie. I don't want to go into any details on it, because as soon as you talk about something publicly, it'll blow up.
Right.
That's right.
But no, I haven't thought about the Star Wars thing.
That's okay. Well, now we've planted the seed, and we'll just let it fester for a while. And when you figure it out, we'll have another talk.
When we see your writing credit on the Ahsoka series or something, then we'll be like, there
something it pops up.
We'll just take a little bit of credit for it. That's great. So, Earl, we have a section on the show we call our 10 question segment, and we throw you 10 questions in sort of the style of Inside the Actors Studio, but they're all Star Wars related, and you can give us short answers, you can give us long answers, you can expand on them, you can there's no wrong answer. I mean, we won't judge you, but the internet will. But other than that, I think it's fine. So if you're cool, I'll throw the first one at you, and that is what's your favorite Star Wars movie, TV show, or book? I know you just said Mando is your favorite recently, but what's the all-time?
I'd have to go with the first one just because of the thrill of the newness of it all. Mm-hmm. I think the best film is probably Empire Strikes Back, the second one, when it gets so dark. Those are the two I find myself rewatching all the time.
Yeah.
But still, because of what became New Hope, which was initially just Star Wars, we've never seen anything exactly like that before. You're never going to recapture the first time in anything. Yeah. But that initial thrill that brought me, first of all, a love of movies, and a movie that felt like my own. Like my parents weren't taking me to see a movie; it was something that I had chose with my buddies, and then it's something that became for us that summer when we got back. We went back to see it with other friends, and just sharing that communal experience. I mean, it set the course of my life. So nothing will ever, in a sentimental way, touch what the first one was to me. Now, I'm part of Mando,
right?
So, I can vote for that for the later stuff. So,
we'll give a check mark for that for sure. Well, I mean, you just said something that's very interesting. In fact, we're speaking at Philly Fan Expo this weekend, and we're talking about Star Wars Through the Generations. And one of the things that you just said is a point that I'm going to be making on that day. And if you want to expand on it, that would be great. The concept of Generation X feels like we own Star Wars, right? And that's part of the rift, the problem. When the prequels came out, there's that little bit of fan discourse. Now that the sequels are out, there's an extended fan discourse. But would you agree with that sort of sentiment that Generation X, like we have a certain ownership with it, and not in a negative way, right? Not in a gatekeepery sort of way, but Star Wars, we feel like it's ours at times.
Well, it was the mythology that spoke to our generation. Now I'm right at the edge of baby boomer. I was born late '63, so I got in on the tail end of that.
So we'll put you in with
you guys were the ones that got to enjoy all the toys. And I just, speaking of the toys, I went on eBay. There's my Tim Olaf. I collect action figures of people that I know.
That's awesome.
So I got my Oliphant, and this is like the penultimate. I got Favreau and Filoni. There's Filoni, some action figure.
Yep.
I'm sure you guys have seen these or have them. And then Favreau here. I haven't unboxed them. I'm not one of these that keeps my toys in boxes. I just had them here for a week and have not unboxed yet. But they will be unboxed and go up over there with all my others soon.
Outstanding.
But yes, that my kids' generation, it's Harry Potter. Now she loved Star Wars, and went to see all the films and stuff. But those Harry Potter stories were for her. They came out when she was in elementary school, and I think it was the third book in which she kind of got caught into that. But she would go to the midnight screening. She would dress up, and in the mid-'90s, remember when they re-released Star Wars, I was at the Man's Chinese Theater at midnight, all three of them. I got my tickets early, talked my wife into it. We went and waited in line. And so, but my kid, I think with everything, she's kind of been turned off Harry Potter with some of the political bullshit that's come into play and all of that. Which is one thing I appreciated. George has just kept his mouth shut and let the stories be the stories. But those are our fundamental stories. Now, hell, I was in college or out. It was before the movies, but Lord of the Rings, I saw there's some similarities in I can see where that influenced George, writing Star Wars, and then Hero of a Thousand Faces, Joseph Campbell's work. I see where that influenced it. So the same stories told through generations. Just the filter that we got it through was Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, 100%,
absolutely. Well, this takes us to our second question, and it's certainly the passion that you have for Star Wars comes through very clearly, and so it may end up being the same answer. But one of the ones we like to throw at our guests, and it's kind of the only non-Star Wars question, is what is your favorite non-Star Wars movie? What's the one that rises to the top of the non-Star Wars list?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, those Halloween and Animal House.
Okay.
Outside of those, when I became to really love film, and to me, you know, there's movies and there's films, and some can be both. But I love a great movie. I love a dumbass. You know, I go to see a lot of horror movies, and most of them, a lot of them are not very good, but they're fun. And but the Godfather 1 and 2. I pretend like 3 doesn't 100%. Exist. But
that's a normal response.
Yeah. And I was so hoping with that re-edit that it would, but I still don't like it. But I think Godfather 1 and 2 is the greatest films. Along with my Taitian Star Wars book, I have the Taitian Godfather book. Yes. And I have Francis Ford Coppola's notebooks. I have all this stuff.
That's awesome.
And I just watched The Offer, the TV, you know, the mini series about the making of the film. So yeah, that.
Okay. Excellent answer.
Awesome.
And then since I would put another one on that is the movies that if I'm flipping channels and there's even a scene, I guarantee you I will stop and watch it, is The Big Lebowski.
Yes.
Yep. That's
I'll tell you what,
long list, but that's them.
Hey, no, it works. And it's funny that comes into play too, because just last night, I came across the link to Prop Stores doing the big props auction coming up in the next couple of weeks, and they have the catalog online. So I spent like 2 hours flipping through this catalog of all these movie props that I can't afford, and I came across the Lebowski section, and there are definitely the rocks glasses that he used to drink the White Russians out of. And I'm going, if I was going to irresponsibly spend $5,000, it might be on those 2 glasses right there.
I have the earmuffs from Something About Mary. I have those. I have Dan Doherty's knife from Deadwood, and Warren's earmuffs from Mary. And I have my Scream, the murder shirt. I kept my first couple of movies I ever worked on. I kept everything I could get my hands on, and the movies came and went, and they were nothing. So I had boxes of shit in my garage that, you know. So when Scream happened, I was offered the wardrobe, and I'm like, you know, I offered whatever. And I'm like, the top story jacket, I'll never wear that. But I took the tennis shoes and the shirts, the Hawaiian shirts that Kenny wore. Because I thought, you know, I did. I wore those Chuck Taylors. They blew out at Bonnaroo in 2014. So that's how long I wore those.
That's
Chuck
amazing.
Taylors. The side finally blew out.
That's a heck of a life.
But, well, the shirt that I was wearing when I got my throat cut, a neighborhood kid, he was in 7th grade, Andy. His mom worked at NBC, and she used to hook us up. We had family coming in for Tonight Show or whatever. Fran took care of us. Well, I knew her kid was crazy about Scream. So I gave him Kenny's shirt. So Andy is now a lawyer. He's married and has kids. And his mom, during COVID, first of all, she calls me. She goes, we're getting rid of a bunch of stuff. Do you want these toys of Andy's? Well, first of all, Fran, they are action figures. And one of them is that McFarlane right there. That McFarlane Michael Myers from Halloween 2. That was once one of Andy's. So I said, yeah. So she leaves this big old box of action figures on my front porch. So she calls me like 2 days later. She goes, oh, I found in his closet, there's this shirt you gave him. I said, yeah, that's from Scream. That's Kenny's murder shirt. Well, do you want it? And I said, well, Fran, it's probably worth a lot of money. And because Scream's got this rabid following. She goes, well, I'll call Andy. So she calls. She goes, Andy doesn't want it. Like, yeah, sure. So it still has, it says Kenny it's the Kenny murder shirt. They washed it, so the blood's gone from it, unfortunately. But yeah, so I do have something from Scream and Something About Mary.
That's awesome.
Deadwood, my favorite things ever that I've been a part of.
See?
That's
so
great.
Good.
So cool. Next question is, this one's a little philosophical. Describe Star Wars in 3 words or less.
Describe Star Wars in 3 words or less. Thrilling, life-changing.
There you go.
Absolutely.
So that's 3 words.
Nails it. 100%. And they're all appropriate. Next one is, what is your favorite Star Wars sound effect? What is the sound effect that just lights you up every time? There it is. Right on cue.
I will sit here at this desk and I'll have both of them.
Uh-huh.
That.
Yep.
I mean,
can't argue with that answer.
It might be the R2D2 bleeps, but I don't have an R2D2. Well, you see, I have a full-size Yoda. That's a sideshow Yoda. And I want the matching Darth Vader, but my wife, first of all, it's really expensive. And second, my wife goes, you do not have room for it because it's like 6'5", it's huge.
Right.
But I still want. And one of these days.
That's right. That's right. And next time you pop down to that Star Wars land you talked about earlier, they've got that full-size R2D2 you can grab too.
It's like $25,000.
Exactly.
You cut out on me for a minute. What was that?
I was gonna say, next time you pop down to that Star Wars land, you mentioned they've got that full-size R2D2 you can grab too.
Yeah. Yep. And I get the Disney. Well, I get the friends and family discount at Sideshow. I was at the Star Wars celebration here. Was it 2 years ago now? A year and a half?
Yeah, Anaheim. Yeah.
And I got there early. I signed stuff for one night. We signed for like 3 hours. And so I went and spent all the money I was going to make out on the floor buying Star Wars stuff. And Sideshow, of course, had a big display, and they do stuff from Scream, and they did stuff from God, what was it? Something else I was involved in. It just so happened the guy that ran Sideshow was there, Andy. So he invited me up, and I got to go tour. And they sent me a Grogu, and then I had to have Yoda to go with it. So one of these days,
love it.
Like I said, it took me about 10 years to get a Les Paul custom, but I got one. So I'll get me a Darth Vader.
That's right, one step at a time.
This isn't one of the 10 questions, but if you're looking at a Les Paul, who's your favorite guitar player? Who's your guitar hero?
Gosh, there's so many. You can, I mean, Hendrix changed the landscape, as did Eddie Van Halen. Eddie was probably the first one because that was my freshman year. Van Halen played Murray State, and my parents wouldn't let me go because nobody heard of him before.
Right.
And I remember my lab partner in physical science came in the next day. He had this V8 shirt on, and I don't even think the first album was out yet. It's Steve Baker, and he goes, "Oh my God, I saw this guitar player last night. You never heard anybody play a guitar like him." I said, "Who?" He goes, "Eddie Van Halen. He gave me this shirt. He gave me this Van Halen. That's their name." And I said, "Hey,
wow,
he ain't no fucking Ace Frehley, all right?" I heard Eruption about a month after that. But yeah, I mean, but I like folks that most people hadn't heard of. Blow my mind. This guy Danny Gatton was from the South, who was this kind of, I mean, he was just an amazing player. Eddie Hazel, I think Maggot Brain is like the greatest piece of guitar music ever written. So a lot of them, and I'm a shitty guitar player. I mean, I can't do that, not at that level. I play well enough to keep up with the good players, but that's about it.
That's all you need. That's all. It's the outlet. I believe it's the outlet. Yeah.
There you go.
All right. So the next question on our list, next official question is, who is your favorite droid?
R2D2.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was
that's a very easy answer for guys our age.
All my Star Wars questions are going to go right back to that first.
Yep.
C-3PO could be a little annoying now and again, but like I could hang out with R2D2.
Yeah.
You saw Jason Fry in our video at the beginning. He did the novelization of The Last Jedi, and he's wearing a shirt that I sent him that said C-3PO is a monster, because we had spoken the first time we spoke. He talked about how C-3PO is all about himself. Everything C-3PO does, he says he's well-meaning, but he's secretly a monster. He puts himself ahead of everything else. So yeah. I don't disagree with you at all.
He's kind of like that dude. You see him walk through the door. You go, "Hey man, it's C-3PO." We all know those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether they're androids or humans, we know those beings.
That's it. Well, Next question is, and we're gonna take Taanti out of the mix since that's one that you have played and that's a real thing. Besides that character, who is the Star Wars character you would most like to be and why?
To play?
Sure.
God. I mean, as a kid, I would have been Han Solo, but I'd never be cast as Han Solo now. Gosh, I don't know. That's a curveball. I mean, in the original films, it would have been fun to be. Well, hell no, being Vader would have been fun. Being the bad guy is always fun to play.
Absolutely.
So yeah, Vader.
I take it.
And James Earl Jones, I worked with him early in my career. And of course, I said, "Oh, you were part of my favorite." And he goes, "Don't tell him he's Star Wars." I went, "Yes, but Mate One." So I got to sit and talk Mate One and Star Wars with the original Darth Vader voice. So,
that's amazing. It's wild. Next question is, what is your favorite Star Wars collectible? In a room full of collectibles, what's your favorite one? It doesn't even have to be something you can buy. I mean, if it's something from a set or something like that.
My full-size Yoda.
Yeah.
And that's why I want a Vader, because that was the first. I mean, I grew up being taken to Fundamentalist Baptist Church, growing up. But the first time of the philosophy behind the Force, well, that just kind of made sense to me, So that was long before I ever took philosophy classes in college or read anything to that. But that.
That's a great one.
That's a good one.
Because I mean, as I said, Vader is the dark side of the person of. I mean, everybody has a dark and a light side. Vader is the penultimate dark side. Yoda is the penultimate light side. Evolved. So, and I was kind of 100%. Torn while I loved in which I confused some of the later films when we first had Kick-Ass Yoda. When he pulled his lightsaber and started fighting. Well, that was cool, but Yoda's nonviolent. He wins without violence. So.
Right. Yeah. What did you think of his return in the sequels in The Last Jedi? Did you enjoy that moment when he came back?
Oh yeah. Well, hell, any of them returned, like Luke returning. On that last episode, that was I've never met Mark. I keep thinking at some point, I'll cross paths and get to say hello to him at some time, but that's yet to happen. One of these days, though.
That's right. We've got to manifest that out into the universe for you.
Well, this weekend I saw The Machine, which was quite funny, and he's hilarious in it. So,
and
that's amazing.
People forget his sense of humor is fantastic. His timing is so good, and the stuff that he's been in that where it's comedy is great. So I'm gonna have to check that movie out. Cool.
Next question. If you could own any spaceship or vehicle from the Star Wars universe, which one would it be? I think I know this answer, but I'm going to give it to you anyhow.
The Falcon. Millennium Falcon.
Exactly.
That's like going, walking into. Have you been to Star Wars Land yet?
I have not.
I've only been to Disneyland here, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, and that ride, Rise of the Resistance, is the most mind-blowing ride I've ever taken part in any, because it's a thrill ride, it's a immersive story, it's everything. I've done it. I think I've been through it 3 times so far, and every time it's just I see something different. So, Star Wars Land, it's worth going. I was who was I there with? Oh, it was with my brother-in-law and nephew. This was back. We went at Christmas. We had not made reservations at the cantina, and again, my wife is an exec at Disney. But even then,
even she can't get it.
That's not a given thing. Well, she happened to text. She goes, check the cantina if they're open. Sometimes when they first open, there are availabilities. Well, we were walking by it when I got the text from her, and it was. So we got to go into the cantina, and so yeah, it's worth the trip to Disney just to go do that.
Absolutely.
I wanted to do the hotel, and I'm sure they're gonna reconfigure that whole. I don't know what they're gonna do with it yet. I'm not privy to that information, But I know that's an immersive, the way it's sold now, and that's one of the problems. It's an immersive experience. It's a story of which you are a part of. And I'm like, well, dude, I'm a part of the real story. So
that's great.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, and I will say, I've been to Galaxy's Edge twice, both times in California. Was I went by myself the first time. Second time I went with my father, who was in his 70s, and my son, who was 10 years old, and both of them had the same response. When you walk around that corner and you see the Falcon for the first time, it's I mean, as a first generation Star Wars fan, holy cow, it's insane. And then you go in and you sit at the chess table, and it's so great. One of my favorite pictures is my son riding in the cockpit, and he's loving life with that. So it's so cool. Great. So we're coming down the home stretch. What is your favorite Star Wars moment?
I mean, the Death Star explosion in the first one, just that thrill of them beating the odds, using the Force. So that, no, I take it back. The initial Star Destroyer flyover that first time in Daytona Beach, Florida, because the hair on my arms literally stood up, just kind of blown back in my seat. So the thrill of the culmination of that story, the Death Star blowing up. But no, that first one, because it was just mind blowing to my 12-year-old innocence.
Awesome. Unbelievable. And then the final question is, what is your go-to Star Wars quote? What is the quote that you just randomly throw out all the time, or one that sticks with you that you just love to use?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Yes. Amazing.
Who knew that?
I mean, that's kind of philosophy of life.
Who knew that Earl Brown also did Yoda's voice?
Oh shit, man! We all did.
Yes,
exactly.
we all do. Some degree of a Yoda. Some were better than others, but that was very good. That was impressive.
100%. 100%.
But that was,
Earl,
I mean, that. No,
go ahead.
That philosophy of that really struck young me, of like, do it or don't do it. Yeah. That's it. You do not let fear stop you. And once you learn to control your fear, then it's, the world is kind of wide open to you.
Absolutely.
So that. And then, when I was in college, another version of it, God, who was it? I think it was Beckett. Ever tried, ever failed. No matter. Try again, fail better.
So,
yep.
Love that. Amazing. Earl, I cannot thank you enough for taking some time to hang out with us this afternoon to have this conversation. Like I said, as a Star Wars fan, as a Deadwood fan, Justified, all the things that you've done have been, are some of my top fandoms, or things that I just love so much. So this is truly an honor for me to get a chance to talk to you and to hear about your love for Star Wars. It comes through very, very easily and effortlessly. And it was just a blessing to get to have this conversation. Before we get you out of here, is there anything you've got coming up you want to tell anybody about, or any plugs you want to do?
I mean, I've had 3 things come out in the last year that got that. I mean, I think they're pretty extraordinary, but nobody watched them. I did 5 Days of Memorial for Apple Plus about Hurricane Katrina. That's gut-wrenching. And then I did Hello Tomorrow, a comedy for Apple Plus that came out at the beginning of this year. And then a show for Peacock called Paul T. Goldman that Seth Rogen produced. That's really weird and funny. And so those 3 things are out. Coming up sometime this year, I don't have the release date yet. There's a Shirley Chisholm biopic with Regina King that John Ridley wrote and directed. And I played Alabama Governor George Wallace. So I think that's going to be a special one. I haven't seen it yet, but I think it's going to be special. And then I recur on Hacks. And I have a episode to do in this season 3 that once the writer's strike gets settled, I should be doing that. It'll probably be on by the end of the year, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
And I did a Western down in Durango, Mexico last fall that Viggo Mortensen wrote and directed. It's called The Dead Don't Hurt. And it should come out this year. I'm not sure if he has a distribution set in place yet or not. I know he was trying to rush to get into cans, but I don't think he'd finished the film yet. So,
gotcha.
That's the last.
Excellent.
I heard. So yeah, those 3 things are in the can, and then coming up, there are a few hooks in the water. A couple of them. There's some juicy fish nibbling on the other end. So
outstanding. Well, we will await anxiously to see what those things are. And again, we're excited for all the work that you do. And thank you again for being with us. And
all right, guys,
we will talk to you again, hopefully sometime soon.
All right.
Thank
later.
You.